Welcome here to the Gamma Project, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Today I have Lawrence from 10 all the way from London. We're going to discuss some cool topics which will provide you with some insights into some questions in which the industry sometimes can create a bit of confusion to. Lawrence, welcome.
Hey, Justin, you okay?
Lawrence, couldn't be better. Healthy, happy, and doing full of research at the moment. So providing people with some real life results with good information, on top of the world. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Find some research how to get rid of muscle ache, then please let me know.
Well, that is a topic, a definite topic of discussion. We can go into that. If you like as well. Lawrence, what do you have for us today? What question do you have to pose for the audience?
Okay, so this is one it's thrown up to me a lot, and it's big in fitness media right now, and it's whether intermittent fasting is good for everyone.
It's so funny. I just spoke to one of my other clients, actually not a client, a student of mine. We came up with a very similar topic of discussion regarding fasting as a whole. Okay, intermittent fasting. Firstly, let's discuss what exactly is intermittent fasting. What do you understand intermittent fasting to be, Lawrence?
So that you close down the window of opportunity to consume food, and I think usually there's a degree of a big calorie deficit anyway, but I know that the promotion of like increased testosterone, and they say it's amazing for your energies and you train harder and stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, in real life, for normal people dealing with real problems, is intermittent fasting a good idea?
Okay, so let's first address their so-called claims of it increasing testosterone and why they come up with claims that increase testosterone. So testosterone increase is by way of a parasympathetic reaction the body will induce due to sympathetic induction, if you want to call it that. So in other words, during times of momentary stress, the body will recruit parasympathetic receptors to release more testosterone, all right, or to mediate the release of more testosterone from control centers in the brain to peripheral centers in the periphery, being that of the gonads for men or from the ovaries for women, right? So, the parathyroid glands for women. So, in order to establish whether or not the body is going to release more testosterone, there needs to be a control to the quantity and the duration, and the most important factor of all, time, right? Time. Everyone tends to neglect that very small but yet big factor regarding whether something can be beneficial or detrimental. Okay, so anything can be construed as being beneficial momentarily, but it depends. But then again, in real world scenario, like you're just asking about, the big underlying factor to consider is time. So momentary exposure to stress, right, will allow for positive adaptation to testosterone production, because with controlled catabolism comes optimal anabolism, and the process of anabolism would be testosterone production. But Lawrence, let's be real here. We live in a world whereby we're always stimulated, right? Whether or not you want to be or not. Okay, so how many routers do you believe are in the complex where you're living in right now? Wi-Fi routers.
I live in a massive complex, so maybe 300.
Right. So do you feel as though your body or your nervous system or your cells, forget about even systems, let's go down to a cellular level, are ever going to be released from a bombardment of external stimulus from electromagnetic frequencies just by living in your complex?
No, there's no, and the majority of London, I imagine. I think, what, with like the BT Wi-Fi that you can pick up anywhere. There's nowhere where you're safe in London. You can get Wi-Fi connection absolutely anywhere, even on the tube now.
Yeah, exactly. And nowadays we also have 5G. We don't even just have 4G, which is which is even operating on even higher frequencies in order to make Wi-Fi accessible. All right, on faster streaming pathways. So what would have taken you a minute to download probably takes you 10 seconds now. So that amplitude of frequency causes disruption. And it causes disruption to all our cells in the body, but in particular creates havoc within our nervous system and control centers within our nervous system that engage either sympathetic or parasympathetic reactions, or in more simpler terms, catabolic or anabolic reactions. So if you think about sympathetic or parasympathetic, this is really bring it down to a more common dialect, catabolic and anabolic. All right. So
And
when you are
break that down even further.
so catabolic, in other words, breaking down of structures in order to produce or release energy. Okay, and the building up of structures is anabolic in order to store or increase the size of a capacity, the size, either the size of the capacity of the cell that it can enable storage, or the storage itself of that cell. All right. So one mobilizes energy, catabolic. One promotes the storage of energy, anabolic.
Just to clarify, I did know that.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
just making it clear for people listening.
No, it's perfect.
I'm trying to moderate you.
No, that's perfect. I'm really grateful for that, because sometimes we can get a little bit lost in the dialect of this, or all the vocabulary of the science behind the human body. So in essence, when we are sympathetically stimulated, we are releasing a lot of energy. And this is the reason why so many people are more stressed now, suffering from anxiety, suffering from depression, insomnia, not to mention all the gastric endocrine dysfunctions that are currently present within our society, from IBS to Crohn's to bacterial overgrowth. Right? And all these symptoms are pretty much the outcome of an overstimulated system. Now, yes, fasting in an ideal situation that isn't bombarded by stimuli coming from every which direction, not just that of the gym, may be beneficial. So a controlled catabolic window may promote a positive reactive anabolic outcome. Okay, so in other words, controlling the amount of energy you release for a moment of time might promote how your body releases hormones that promote muscle growth or promote energy storage in the body. But it comes down to one very important underlying factor: time. Now, in the world in which we live in, we don't unfortunately have control over the time of which we are stimulated through. Particularly if you live in a very congested city like London, you are going to be stimulated from when you wake up, probably whilst you're sleeping, and when you're during the course of your day. So there's no escape. There's absolutely no escape. Let alone those who are even further stimulated by working behind computers. I mean, it's one thing for a fitness professional like yourself who works with people, not having to be stimulated by external technological, in fact, and should we say terrestrial, not terra, but terrestrial environmental factors, so foreign environmental factors, but even worse so for the clients which you train that work behind the computer screen in an office, whom are bombarded with excessive UV light, ricocheting from the ceiling down to the floor, not to mention artificial blue light coming from the computer screen itself. So this abundance of stimulus creates a stressful situation in the body. Now, when you fast, right, you in essence stop the intake of calories, right, for the purpose of inducing the release of energy from cells or from the energy stored within cells in your own body. How do you think, Lawrence, the body enables the release of energy the release of energy that is stored in our cells?
For a stress hormone.
Which induces acidity in the body, right? So anytime, if you train, you induce acidity, hence the reason why you burn fat along with muscle tissue and everything else. So when you create an acid-like state within the body, you will release energy. So you will lose body fat. You may lose muscle as well. You also probably lose hydration, or the storage of how much water your cells have, which is terrible because we work on not electric current, but we work on synaptic current within our body, which is very similar to how a circuit board would communicate with different components in the computer. Right? Now, if you can imagine, if we don't have the conductivity that we should have within ourselves, we're not relaying messages effectively, and in particular, not energetically effectively to the rest of our body either. So, by inducing a diet, or sorry, not by inducing, by encouraging the use of a diet that promotes more acidity, and by doing so releases more fat to be burnt, 100%, I'm not taking that away. Ketogenic diets do help with fat loss. Yes, they do. But they cause a lot more stress to the gastric endocrine function, as well as to one's autonomic nervous system status. So the balance between anabolism and catabolism, which we know as being the homeostatic needle.
I think I've experienced that myself. Like, I remember years and years back trying a keto diet, and like my stomach was completely fine. And then when I'd gone through like a couple of months of keto, I was sensitive to everything you could imagine.
You know what increases with ketogenic diets, or the release of ketones for energy in the body?
No.
Nitrogen levels. And in particular, and what has to not assimilate, digest, if you want to call it digest, or process is a better word. What has to process excessive nitrogen in the body? The kidneys, right? So if anybody were wanting to partake either on a ketogenic or a semi-fasting, intermittent fasting, whatever fasting of your choice you would decide to go engage in, do me a favor, please take a look at these blood markers in reaction to these diets: blood urea nitrogen, creatinine, and homocysteine levels. Please take a look at those three markers, and I can guarantee you, for the most part, apart from the very few, probably the 5% of the population, most people after a month of following these diets religiously, not breaking from it and having a little meal here or a little hamburger there, a slice of lemon meringue pie, get none of that. Religiously following these diets for the purpose of fat loss, guess what? Those markers are going to be elevated. And if homocysteine is elevated, it's a pro-inflammatory marker that causes havoc to almost every segment within the body, from your cardiovascular to your neurological to your entire endocrine function on a cellular level. So even the receptors become dysfunctional through through elevated amounts of homocysteine. All right, now we're talking about blood urea nitrogen. Oh, wow. Now here we go into complete adrenal dysfunction, because guess what? The adrenals and the renal system are very closely related in their function. So when the adrenals become more heightened and active, the kidneys also hold on to more water. Right? So release more water. When they become less active, they hold on to more water until there's a point where it depends on the time where they're stimulated, and eventually they'll start holding water as well. And edema might be the onset through that as well. So all it comes down to the time. But the essence behind that is renal and adrenal activity are very closely related. They are like brothers in the same family. And if you piss one brother off, the other brother is going to get flippin' angry and not do what you ask of it to do. Right, so you got to consider this. So everyone says, we've got two schools of thought. Protein is good for you because it promotes neuropeptide production, which helps neurotransmitters. Yes, it helps detoxification pathways because it aids in conjugation. So the 6 conjugation pathways proteins help with. Yes, they do. Not taking that away. And the other schools say excessive protein causes real serious damage to the kidneys. And then other schools are, that's nonsense. It doesn't cause damage to the kidneys. And slightly elevated creatinine levels are completely normal. No, it's not normal. Guys, elevated levels of creatinine for prolonged periods of time are going to cause damage to your, and not only your erythrocytes, but your hepatocytes as well. All right, which means that you're going to become dysfunctional.
With adrenal issues should cut back on the consumption of protein.
Most definitely, not necessarily. Where should we say protein as a whole, but certain sources of protein. All right. So animal sources of protein have a far more complex amino acid structure, hence the reason why they're called complex, or they're not partial, they're complete amino acid sources, right? Whereas vegan or vegetarian, you have to combine legumes and pulses together in order to create a full protein structure with all the amino acids, okay? Now, the difference is because animal protein contains a full amino acid structure, it also means it contains a higher quantity and density of nitrogen, right? So not to say you shouldn't have any animal protein, but the quantity of your nitrogen load that you have to contend with if your kidneys are in a state of distress is a considerable factor to take on board, right? So until someone is able to mediate, well, not mediate, mediate is not the right word, modulate their stress effect or their sympathetic reactions, should we say, one really needs to consider how much protein, also very importantly, how much fat saturated fat is coming into the diet. Because another thing that becomes impaired is the release of pepsin from excessive elevation of cortisol. And if pepsin becomes impaired, so too does the release of bile become impaired as well. So there's so many factors. It's not just because a fad or a segment within the fitness population say, great, ketogenic diets work because this person lost 20% body fat in 12 weeks. Let's take a look at that same person in a year from now. They still might be doing okay if they're lucky. Let's take a look at that same person 3 years from now. I can guarantee you if they're following a ketogenic diet for that period of time, they're not going to be happy. And guess what? When they go off that ketogenic diet and they go back to trying to eat normal again, what comes back up? All that unwanted weight. All that, and the reason for that, what would you think the reason is for that, Lawrence?
Poor nutrient assimilation.
Definitely, but why? Why would a person have poor nutrient assimilation after having followed a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting diet, or we were talking about intermittent fasting diet for a prolonged period of time?
That's a good question. Why would they? Underproduction of bile and pepsin and HCl.
Most definitely. And why would the body start to produce less of these essential gastric endocrine hormones?
I'm not sure.
Because of the shift of the homeostatic norm. Anytime you expose the body to an environmental stimulus, and guess what, guys and girls? Food is an environmental stimulus. So when you expose our biology to an environmental stimulus, adaptation occurs. All right. So yes, you might lose fat for a little while. You might feel invigorated because you're using loads more ketones. And ketones have 3 times energy density for neurons in the brain. They do. Yep. That's for sure as an energy source, but they don't talk about the subsequent effect that they have in the metabolism of ketones and what type of acidity that causes to the body, and in essence, what type of aggravation it causes to the nervous system as a whole. So just because something looks good on the surface doesn't mean it's great down below. Just because something gives you more energy doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. Just because, marijuana may make you feel happy doesn't mean you should smoke it every single day or smoke it at all. Right? And that brings us to another topic. Is like there's a lot of new age thinking when it comes to nutraceutical intervention toward health, like that of CBD oil, THC oils, which have their place if used appropriately within the right parameters and with the right person as well. But used incorrectly, and this is the problem within the community, people are just taking the reins by their own accord without consulting a professional, or without even if they don't want to consult a professional, which I can understand because unfortunately, especially in my experience of London, a lot of GPs, not specialists, but GPs don't know much about hormones, let alone neurology, to even ask them their opinion in the first place. And that's a disappointment because it's unfortunately the truth. However, there are a lot of neurologists and specialists and like endocrinologists available, but they come with a higher price tag. So some might think, okay, great, I'm just going to do a little bit of reading and then make up my own mind. If you're going to do a little bit of reading, don't do a little bit of reading, do a lot of reading. You're putting a foreign drug into your body, which will cause a chemical reaction in your brain. Right? You can always recover from a fractured tibia. Well, your mechanics might be slightly altered, but it's not going to destroy your life. But you can't always recover from lesions that you cause in your brain. Right? That's sometimes irreparable, and you can't always come back from it. So you got to consider like professional advice and also in extensive research before you commit to anything regarding intermittent fasting, regarding ketogenic diets, regarding any new age nutraceutical intervention like THC oil or CBD oil, let alone other interventions as well. Now, I'm not saying that they don't warrant in measure. They do. They are extremely beneficial, particularly with certain cases of cancer. But that's not to say that they are for everyone. And that's not to say that even individuals who do exhibit signs of, say, cancer or arthritis should utilize these nutraceuticals because there might be a contraindication to their biology or to their DNA.
Yeah, it's very popular at the moment.
It is. It is. I mean, it's because it's new, right? And it's the same old snake oil salesman's routine. If you wow people with a few positives, but neglect to mention, the whole story of a few negatives from the scenario, that you're more likely going to sell more shit that people don't need, right? And not everybody needs.
That kind of goes on to my third question. I think I know we talked about fasting and ketones, and for me, I come from a background of people of into that sort of culture. Because they're into that culture, they've usually come from a history of excessive drug use. What I want to know in detail is what would your major precautionary measures be from going from a lifestyle of recreational drug use to one of so-called fitness and health?
Very good question. Very, very good question. I've had extensive exposure personally as well as professionally to a lot of people who have had to deal or contend with the same issue. Unfortunately, it's not a topic that's often spoken about because it's frowned upon, but it's a very real.
No fitness professionals will delve into that area. None of them are willing to accept that it's been part of their lives and talk about their experiences, and none of them unfortunately offer any advice into considerations when it comes to transitioning from a not so healthy toxic life into a life that is on the surface much fitter but still equally offers a stress from a lot of different directions.
We live in a society of smoke and mirrors. That's in essence, everybody likes to talk about all the glitzy stuff, right? Like just exactly what I mentioned before. It's a snake oil salesman tactic. Talk about the benefits, but don't talk about any of the cons, right? And in the industry, I agree with you. Unfortunately, we're always guided by those who portray themselves as being perfect. And in reality, nobody's perfect, not by a long shot. Drugs are a very real problem in society, and it's a growing problem in society. And the reason why I believe that drugs are a growing problem in society is because people are becoming overstimulated, overwhelmed, overworked, and they're looking for an immediate way to control their emotion, because their emotions are, in essence, control of their emotions are being taken away from them, not necessarily by choice in every instance, but sometimes by overwhelming pressure and stress. And any person put into a stressful situation, I can guarantee you, will change their mindset of how they perceive that situation. Any situation. If you take a soldier and you put him in a battlefield, right, that soldier will be happily and willingly ready to kill another soldier from the opposing army. You take that same soldier and you put them in a training situation and you say, go kill that guy. Go kill that guy across the way from you. Will that soldier be likely to go ahead and murder somebody else? No, because the perception of the scenario, or the scenario itself, is completely different. And this is the problem, is that we perceive our worlds to be calm and pleasant, but it's really not. It is a world that is filled with ongoing and persistent stress. And it's very important that we recognize it rather than turn a blind eye to it, because when you turn a blind eye to it, that's when drug use, self-abuse come into question. And people say, I don't know why I went and did that. You know, I personally myself have unfortunately had an experience and history of using drugs as well. And I'm not one to lie or shy away from it, because it is a part of who I was at a time in my life. But I can safely say that my drug use is no longer an issue. And the reason why it's no longer an issue isn't because of a miracle coming from, you know, Jesus Christ or the Savior or Allah or anything like that. Some people turn to religion to help them with that. No, it's because I came to the point of identifying the fact that what world I lived in, the amount of stresses that were around me, and by doing so, I was able to change and alter my environment to not cause so much discord in my body, in my nervous system. So me having a need, or as we say, a craving, or even the subconscious thought of self-abuse fell away. Now, your question with regards to anybody that's experienced or experimented with drug use in their past, what to do with them, with their fitness regime. Okay, very, very important. Anybody that has used either recreational or pharmaceutical means in order to either manage a pain for prolonged periods of time. So anybody who's been on morphine, anybody who's been on pethidine, or any type of Schedule 6 drug, all right? That's including people with learning disabilities or epilepsy, all right? And not just guys that go and have a rave and take an ecstasy pill, okay? Everybody's included into this topic right now. Once you take a pharmaceutical agent, and in that we include the topic of recreational drugs, you alter the chemistry of the receptors in the brain. Now, receptors outside the nervous system, we talk about an insulin receptor, all right, or an androgen receptor. When an insulin receptor becomes overworked, it becomes desensitized, right? In other words, it requires more insulin to create the same effect in the body. However, receptors of certain neurotransmitters in the brain work in opposite to that, or opposition to that, meaning that once you stimulate the dopamine receptor, as an example, it actually becomes more sensitive. So when you create a stressful environment that would naturally mediate the release of dopamine, you, me, anybody that's had the unfortunate experience of self-abuse are going to be affected more so to that stressor than those who never had that stressor in the first place, or those who never used drugs in the first place. So the way in which your receptors are altered to deal with stress is completely different, dependent on the environment of which you were exposed to your central nervous system. So those using drugs, be very cautious on any type of stimulant before training. Any pre-workout, nitric oxide, blow your head off, blood, guts, sweat, tears, jack to the max. Abstain, abstain, abstain. Stay away from any type of pre-workout that's going to increase the release of norepinephrine in your body. Okay? It's not going to benefit you. It's going to cause you more harm, because the negative effect, your brain will have a far greater receipt of dopamine to the mediated release of metabolizing whatever stimulants in these crazy, jacked out pre-workouts, and which is by byproduct going to release more cortisol than the person who never had that exposure to drugs. Right, so you can release more cortisol than what you should. An excessive release of catecholamines or excessive facilitation of a sympathetic response will dictate that the time frame of which you're exposed to that response becomes detrimental, not beneficial. So remember, everything comes down to time. If you expose yourself to something for long enough, it will become detrimental. Even something good, even something wholesome. If you have too much broccoli, and the only thing you eat all day long is broccoli, 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 it will cause a gastrointestinal issue and will also cause a proliferation of unwanted bacterial overgrowth, believe it or not, let alone the increase of sulfur that the body will have to contend with, causing compromised liver. Even though broccoli aids with liver detoxification processes, excessive amounts of it will impair it too. So even something as simply as healthy, if you expose yourself to it for too long a period of time, will become detrimental. So those whom are or whom have experimented with drugs, first thing, error caution to your pre-workout supplementation. Second thing, monitor your biometrics, monitor your glucose in the morning, monitor your heart rate variability, monitor your body temperature, your blood pressure. When these 4 factors start to become irregular, and you'll be able to determine what's regular for you after doing a process of data capture. Everyone's different, but we're not going to get into that now. But any of those 4 factors become irregular, that's when you need to hold back of sympathetic-based training. So we get different types of training modalities, right, Lawrence? We get yoga and we can get weight training. Let's compare those two. Yoga can be performed in a sympathetic fashion if you're not used to yoga and you go to a class and you got some crazy bendy girl in the front of the class trying to get you to do every vinyasa possible within the shortest period of time. That's stressful for any man, especially, and I say man because most of us guys are not as flexible, right, as these yogi girls. However, if you go to a class and you have a thoughtful instructor that gives you enough time to get into a pose or doesn't ask you to overreach or exceed your limitations and get you into a compromising position, but rather beneficial position, yoga becomes calming. It allows you to open up your fascial trains and increase diaphragmatic rhythm. In other words, it improves parasympathetic reactions because as soon as you improve function of the diaphragm, so too do you also increase facilitation of parasympathetic receptors along the spinal column. That's one way. Weight training, however, when you go into weight training, you're lifting an external load that's imposed onto your body. So you have to deal with not only internal, but external forces. So it's quite stressful. And because it's stressful, it causes initiation of adrenals to become more active in order to mediate more energy to contend with that stress. All right? And when you're in a brace position, trying to push a weight off your back or off your chest, whatever it might be, guess what? The tissue that surrounds the diaphragm becomes compressed, which means that oxygen exchange also becomes compromised during highly sympathetic activity. Hence the reason why we release more catecholamines to provide more for glucose, right? Because through the process of ATP production in the mitochondria, right, we also initiate more oxygenation of cells through the mediated balance of complex 4 oxidative phosphorylated pathway function and that of nitric oxide production. So they work in homeostasis with one another, if you want to call that a word. When one increases too much, the other one starts to come up as well. One goes too high, the other one starts to mediate effect and bring it down. So they balance one another out. Okay, but that is sympathetic-based training. So those who have had a history of drug use or stimulant use or pharmaceutical intervention because they've been in hospital for surgery or some serious life-threatening disease, consider the effects of the type of training, whether it's sympathetic or parasympathetic in nature, the effects of the stimulants that you use prior to your training session. Are they heightening your dopamine response to becoming detrimental, not beneficial to your training session itself? Consider the post-workout effects as well. What do you do right after you've done a weight training session? Do you just go straight back into doing some work? Or do you take the time to stretch? Now, there's a lot of contradicting evidence out there or viewpoints on stretching after training, right? Some people say you shouldn't stretch after training because the muscle spindles have become more relaxed and you could possibly overstretch the muscle. The muscles are inflamed, so on and so forth. I'm sure there is some truth to it. However, what I would say is, doing steady-state cardio always helps, but it helps more for the process of setting balance to PMRF, which basically regulates hemispherical symmetry within our body. Okay, it's a whole new topic talking about PMRF, but associate your, if you really want to know more about PMRF, it stands for Pontomedullary Receptor Facilitation. Okay, and it's pretty much with and along with the concert with MRF, which is mesencephalon reticular formation. Those processes within our midbrain help to control hemispherical balance or structural balance within our body. Okay, now doing steady-state cardio, if you do it effectively and you have a good gait cycle, can reinstall balance between the both hemispheres, because you're looking at a central object and you're walking toward a central object, creating a natural swing pattern of a gait cycle. However, those who have had a history, okay, of excessive stimulation, let's call it that, because it can range from self-abuse to medical intervention, right? Excessive stimulation, some way or some form, and have altered the receptor chemistry within their brain. Doing post-workout stretches, and we're not talking about stretches that cause a compromise to your active range or your active control, a comfortable stretch, okay? It can be sitting down, in a short adductor pose, okay? Not a long adductor pose, a short adductor pose, in a meditative pose, in other words, right? And just sitting there and breathing calmly and concentrating on your diaphragmatic tone.
More yin or respiratory based styles.
Taking measures after inducing a high amount of stress in your body to try and induce a more parasympathetic reaction or awareness in the body can go a long way, huge way, to not only benefiting your training regime, but also possibly negate you going off into relapse. More often than not, drug addicts or alcoholics, or whatever, will start an exercise program for the purpose of rehabilitating their lives, right? And most drug addicts you've come across, right, Lawrence, are extremists, right? Most drug addicts you ever met are probably extremists. They 180-degree swing from one polar aspect of the pendulum to the next. So when they're engaged with their drug habits, they'll be drinking a shitload of whiskey, taking loads of cocaine, smoking loads of dope, whatever it might be. But when they go into the fitness lifestyle, their fridge is stocked up to the max with every possible healthy ingredient you can imagine. They wake up at 4 a.m. every day, go for a run, go train twice a day, eat well, and they get so upset when they miss a meal and they become overly critical. All right? That's the nature of a person that is trying to reform themselves from a drug addiction. It's an extremist nature. You got to be careful. All right? You really, really need to be careful, because with that extreme nature also comes a lot of room for error. All right? It is far better to establish a healthy awareness of what installs not only good compositional change, but calm, very much so calm. Okay? If you swing from one great aspect to another great aspect, and you try to do too much, and you overstimulate yourself, and you start, even though your body's aching, your knees feel like they want to pop, your neck feels like it's grown a tumor by the state of the muscle spasm or the trigger point that's centered around your occiput, but yet you want to go and do some crazy overhead presses, right? That's an unfortunate habit of a person that is in recovery from drug addiction that wants to do exercise. Now, as a coach or as a person that's gone through it themselves and is trying to help another person not to go through that relapse state, it's very important to let the person know when they need to hold back. Because pushing too hard, guess what that does? It overstimulates stress. And why did those people engage in, for the most part, why do people engage of the use of recreational drugs?
Escaping from the initial stress in the first place. So you're exposing yourself to just a new form of stress in the style of exercise.
Exactly. And exercise shouldn't be a detrimental stress exposure. It should be a beneficial. But there's one, like I said, underlying factor which determines whether it's beneficial or detrimental: time. Hence the reason why on the Gamut Project, as you know, Lawrence, all my workouts are gauged to specific protocol of time.
And what would you say for most people is peak cortisol? You know, what time for most people, depending on their genetics and health, will a workout become detrimental?
Depends on the type of workout, firstly. So, high intensity interval training, true high intensity interval training can become detrimental after 4 minutes.
Wow.
Right, but that's true. We're talking about all-out sprints now. I'm not talking, not the perceived idea of high-intensity interval training in the fitness world. Real, true medical when they test the response rate of how mitochondrial density changes from high-intensity interval training, they do it the parameter of what I'm talking about to be high-intensity interval training. You shouldn't be able to sustain the same level of intensity for longer than 4 minutes and 20 seconds. If you are, then you're not doing true HIIT. You're not. No matter what, Billy with a six-pack tells you at the local Fitness First. Billy's got a six-pack because he's got great genes and he works in a gym and doesn't have to work behind a computer. And for the most part, probably is under 30 and can cope with a lot of the stress that's currently bombarding his life. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen, when you get older, your tolerance to all these beautiful factors of stress starts to deplete, which means that you should become more mindful. It's time to become more mindful, because if you don't, you succumb or you are made vulnerable to possible serious addiction, or possible serious self-harm in many other ways and forms. It's not only about looking good, it's very much important about feeling good, right? You got to feel good.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's definitely not connected.
No, unfortunately, they're not. They should be. The reason why they're not is because of the information that is currently being spread out there in the fitness industry. It's go hard or go home, blood, sweat, and tears. Do the grind. If you want to be successful, you're going to wake up earlier than everybody else and do the grind. Do the grind. You don't see me taking a break from doing this. I go and I put pictures up on Instagram all the time, or I go and I do this all the time. No matter what the competition, when the competition is sleeping, I'm there doing everything I need to do. And the way these guys sound, right, is as if they had a dildo stuck up their arse and they're very uncomfortable. Very, very uncomfortable. And that's not the way to do it. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of what you do, right? So you can spend a lot of time doing a lot of nothing and be exhausted from doing a lot of nothing. I think we've all been there. I've definitely been there. And through doing a lot of nothing, you end up putting yourself in a position whereby you're going to maybe mediate a release. And, if you have a history with mediating, stress release with drugs, unfortunately, that's possibly where your subconscious is firstly going to drift off to. So don't worry about the grind. Don't worry about getting the 200 kilo squat. Don't worry about, bench till your pecs pop or whatever crazy saying, these guys come up with. Worry more about how your body feels while you're training. Don't concern yourself so much with the inconsequential factors. And I say the inconsequential because in the long run, the only person that's really going to worry about you lifting 200 kilos in a squat is you. Nobody else really cares. Even if you lift 300 kilos, no one cares besides you what you're doing. They really don't. Right? But it would be far better. Can you hear me there, Lawrence? Hello? 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 I think we've gone offline there, ladies and gentlemen. Wait for Lawrence to come on back. We'll be back in a moment. Hi guys, sorry about that. Unfortunately, we are cut off with the internet. Hope you enjoyed that last segment with about the GAMP project that we had here with Lawrence Fountain. Stay tuned in and join us for the next Q&A sessions coming up with a whole new host of clients talking about real-world topics within the fitness industry, breaking the mold and providing with scientific evidence behind our logic and thought processes towards giving you the best opportunity to develop the best strategy to get ongoing developed results. Take care and have a good evening.